Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. I hope I didn't throw you off schedule. It's wonderful to be here today. It's a beautiful day. I want to tell you a little bit about myself in just a couple minutes. My whole life story really kind of has education intertwined through it all. I was born and raised in Concord. I've been in Contra, Costa County all my life. Have dabbled a little bit, lived in Richmond for a little while, Pittsburgh for a little while, but mostly in Concord, and now I live in Martinez. I was raised up, I'm the youngest of 6, and I was raised up in the Mount Diablo School District. And school was not something I enjoyed ever as a little kid. And I don't have memories. It's really interesting that I'm actually in education, because I don't have memories of great teachers who, you know, encouraged me on. I don't have pleasant memories of school. And I started being truant in the 6th grade, and I started being kicked out of school in the 7th, and I was completely kicked out by the time I was in the 8th grade in middle school. And that was the last school I attended, and I just fell through the cracks after that. I was kicked out of a community school where I had been sent because I was a truant, and a teacher told me, you know, to get out of here, and I got out of there, and I became a runaway and just fell through the cracks of society for about a decade. And then as a young single mother, I was in my early 20s, and I realized I needed to change my life, and I went back to school. And school transformed my life. And it was at that point that I had amazing teachers and amazing administrators and amazing mentors who encouraged me and helped my life take off. And graduating college, I started to work in the county jails as a teacher. And it was my way, because the men and women in the county jails were very much like me. You know, I'd gone to school in juvenile hall. I'd been in trouble as a young person. And I became a teacher for the County Office of Education. I then became a principal for the County Office of Education, a director, a senior director. I've done all areas of the Office of Education, which, for those of you who don't know, because many people don't know, the county superintendent runs the County Office of Education. A lot of people don't know what that role is. So the job that I am campaigning for, I've been working for a long, long time. I've been in the county office for 21 years in a variety of roles, everything from student programs to accountability. And education has transformed my life, and I want to make sure that everybody, no matter where they are in life, has the opportunity to experience what I experienced through education, because I was given a life beyond my wildest dreams because of education and because of some incredible teachers. Perfect.
Thank you. What reform measures, if any, do you think are needed in the County Office of Education?
In the County Office particular, some of the reform measures, and I wouldn't call them like official reform measures, like from a state level where I think of reform. Some of the work that we do around re-entry from our jails and juvenile halls, those are 2 areas. One is some of the work that we do. We are in collaboration with our school board or our county board, and we actually need to do a lot of work about how we work with our county board. And then the other is, which is, I believe, a really important area of reform, is the work that we do around 0 to 5-year-olds, so birth through kindergarten, and the work we do around preschool, because one area that the county office has some jurisdiction is around working in preschools, and I want to help do a better job with those. So those are kind of 3 key areas that I think can really take some focus.
What level of oversight and accountability do you believe the chartering agency must provide taxpayers after approving a charter application?
I think there should be as much oversight as there is for a traditional school. So and here's what I always want to be clear, because I actually think there's sometimes so much bureaucracy for traditional schools. I don't want to impose that on any schools. I actually think for charter schools, we need more accountability, more clarity, more transparency, more opportunities, because the way a charter renewal or reauthorization works, there's kind of a timeline, and there's, unless they're doing something so egregious that you can step in, and the superintendent at any time with any charter school throughout the county, whether we are an authorizer or not, or our board, so the county office doesn't do the authorizing, but our school board can step in and do an investigation at any time. So she does have that authority. But I think that there needs to be... I know, I was going to say, how can I stop when I just was getting warmed up to it?
Well, let's say there was a second part to the question.
Okay, so there needs to be more kind of entry points into where we can legally do the oversight of the charter schools, where where it wouldn't be considered an overreach or interference, which right now it can, because the way the law is written right now, charter schools have a lot of latitude and not a lot of oversight. And there is some work being done on a statewide level right now. Tom Torlakson has put together a task force, right, that is just jumping off into how we can have better oversight into our charter schools. And there's also an organization that is working with all the county boards to really teach them and train them about county oversight of charter schools and school boards. This will also help inform school boards how to have that oversight, because right now it's almost like hands off until the place is on fire, right? We do like a little bit of oversight, we go visit, but that's because that's the way the law is written. So they are doing it, which we are involved in at the county office. It's an agency, an organization that's tied to the state that will really teach us how to oversee them in a way that's meaningful. Because the laws around charter schools were written like 26 years ago when there weren't even the issues that we have in education. They weren't even issues. So it's a big, big area. And I would say that would probably be another area where I'd say reform work needs to be done. Not just in our own school board, but in all the district school boards who do authorizing also.
Well, this one has a question mark at the end, but it seems like a statement. California's Ed Code allows boards which approves or allows the approving body to appoint a board member of that charter. So I didn't know that was the case. So if it's not the case, and if this is worded in a way of asking your opinion, if you think that should be the case.
I know that that is true, that there is authorization where the board could appoint somebody on the board. I know it came up in one of our last go-rounds with charter authorizations at our board, because I sat through all of the hearings. And I know there was like somebody on our board that thought somebody from our board should be appointed, which in that case would be, in my opinion, a complete conflict of interest to have the authorizing board person also on the board of the charter school, because anytime it came up to be authorized, they'd have a vote whether or not to reauthorize themselves. So that doesn't make sense.
So it has to be from the board, can't be another person?
No, it can be another. It can be a community person, which if they're going to do it, that's who it should be. It should be somebody from the community where there's no conflict of interest when it comes to reauthorizing. And it really should be somebody that's in the school community where that charter school is.
Okay, thank you. Please explain about the working relationship and history you have had with labor unions.
So I am a former teacher. I've been in an administrative union. I have been on negotiating teams for both the classified and the certificated. I have a very strong relationship with my labor unions. We have two at our County Office of Education. I've been endorsed by a couple of the building trades unions that I have a good relationship with, because in every aspect of my career, from the time I was a teacher to the time I was a deputy superintendent, I have reached out to the building and trades and brought them into our schools. So when I was a teacher, I reached out to them because the students I was working with could benefit from the services and the skills and the job opportunities they had. When I was a coordinator in the jails, I coordinated a career fair where I brought all the unions together and they came in. And now as a deputy superintendent, when I found out that they weren't being invited to a certain table, I reached out to them. And this was all before I was campaigning, so they knew that it was a genuine concern and care of mine.
Some have called for a moratorium on approval of new charter schools. Do you think such a moratorium is practicable or desirable?
I think it's actually desirable but not practical. I think the way I think you guys, somebody here in West County on a citywide level, I think, did a moratorium on land, so they couldn't do the
Richmond
land.
Did.
Richmond. And I think that's actually the only legal way they could go about it, because the way the law is written, really you couldn't do a moratorium on charter schools the way the law is written right now. And right now in certain areas, because it's so contentious and we don't really know what's happening with them, and it's almost kind of like taking over as a wildfire a little bit in certain areas. And that's where I think at least some brakes need to be put on. Maybe while this statewide task force is looking at charter schools and the way they interact with the districts, just kind of a pause. We need a little pause in just a few areas. There's some districts that are not affected by charter schools at all, but there are some that they're really being torn apart by charter schools.
What is your position on academies in high schools, and do they need any changes, or how are these implemented and how they're implemented?
You know, I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with implementing academies because, except for a few years working in Oakland and Alameda Unified, I've spent most of my career at the County Office of Education, where we run the student programs in the jails and the juvenile halls and for expelled students. I have some experience with our county office, with our ROP and CTE, helping districts with their academies, so providing medical, like Dozier Libby in Antioch, where we help provide some of the pathways. So I believe as long as students are having choice, and that and I don't mean choice as in the federal term choice, but as a choice of that they don't get pigeonholed into, in 9th grade they thought they might want to be something, and then they're stuck in a school that only focuses on medical or arts or whatever it is, as long as there's a variety. And if I have time, I'll just add that, you know, one of the wonderful things that we do at our county office, and also some of the districts do, is career technical education now, which is really a lot of academy work focuses around that. They're now being designed so they are A to G, so that they're no longer just, you don't have to choose between being on a college track or a vocational education track. You can be doing vocational education, really hands-on career technical education work, and being on college track, so that at the end of those 4 years you don't have to go, oh, you know, gosh, I really want to go to college, but I blew it. I didn't take, you know, I've been only doing career technical education. So we really are doing more work around making sure that students and families have more options.
How would you remedy the disproportionate number of students of color being suspended?
That, I believe, really needs to be taken down. I mean, so I'll tell you about the work we're doing around that, because that has been a focus of ours for a while. And it's, you know, the disproportionality to me is not improving, because working in the jail and the juvenile halls, you see it to where there's no disputing it, right? There's no, it's like a visual. You walk in, like I walk into work, and the classroom in the jail is all men of color, right? And there's just no disputing it. And the work needs to be done both on a very young level, right? And it's about training the staff and hiring proper staff and diversifying the workforce and changing our suspension policies. And we've been trying to do work around changing the suspension policies across the state, across the districts. And what happened, which often does happen when you're implementing any kind of new reform, it just kind of got rolled out in a way that it was like, okay, teachers, You cannot suspend. And what happens is like this push-pull happens in the classroom because they weren't given any real tools to deal with some of the behaviors that was going on in the class, or even tools and training to understand the behaviors going on in the class. They were just, it was almost like overnight they were told, okay, once upon a time you could, if things are being disruptive in your class, you can kick a kid out and send them off and suspend them. And then the next day they were told no, without figuring out what to do with this behavior in the class. So it came kind of a point of contention where every teacher I know, but again, I work a lot with alternative education populations, they believe in changing the suspension policies to end that school to prison pipeline. They truly believe it in their heart. But even they didn't have the tools to do it. So we've been doing like equity initiatives. We've been doing All Kids Are Our Kids initiatives, where it really is looking at culturally responsive pedagogy with teaching, culturally responsive teaching in a real deep way, and really looking at biases and, you know, why are you kicking out all the kids of color? And really taking a look at that and giving them tools to not do that, at the same time changing policy. I'm sorry, that was a long answer, though he didn't stop me.
It's all very complicated.
It is all very complicated. It's hard to answer a very complex question in 30 seconds. It really is.
You're doing good. You're doing good. I think I get the gist of this, that what can a city do if there's just a saturation of charter schools in their area? You know, next door has none, they have a bunch. I don't know where we would be talking about, but theoretically.
What's the question? What can a city do?
What can a city take a role if there's a saturation of too many charter schools?
That's an interesting question. I know what Richmond did. I mean, they stepped in and did a moratorium on the land or the space. You know, I was just at a meeting the other day where they were looking at models of kind of community building, and there's a really good example in Monterey where everybody's involved. So the city's involved, the county office is involved, all the local districts are involved, and all the board of supervisors are involved. And they really are involved in this, and all the community-based organizations. And they look at issues about education in the community, about health in the community. Well, I mean, they do it as this collaborative. And here's the trouble right now, because the way the law is written about charter school, we could all come into agreement about, okay, we think there should only be this many charter schools, or this, or this, or this. The way the law is written, I could teach probably any one of you right now how to write a good charter school application that could pass, right? And that I could get this charter written into your community, even if we all disagreed, even if we all said, well, we don't want another charter school, because the way the law is written, if the Richmond School Board denies it, it'll come to the county board. If we deny it, the state's going to approve it. If it's just like if you check these, if all these criteria are done, and it's a pretty easy criteria to hit. So it really is something we need to work on a state level in partnership and say, we need to change this. It is kind of out of control a little bit, the way the law is written. I don't know what a city can do, is my short answer. Okay. I'll find out.
Can you give us a closing statement?
Yes. We have 1 minute for closing statements. Just go. Okay, thank you. The hardest part about learning to campaign is I've never had experiences where I'd be talking and somebody'd hold up a thing saying 30 seconds. And I'd be like, it's really something to get used to. So I really do want to thank everybody here. I have felt a lot of support when I've come out to West County from all the Democratic clubs. I have been passionate about being a Democrat for a long, long time. I would be able to say I was a lifelong Democrat, but when I was 18, I marked the independent box because that sounded better, right? It sounded cooler. And then my first time through, I found out that I couldn't vote. I couldn't vote in the Democratic primaries back then. Anyway, so I am also passionate about equity and social justice in schools and having high academic standard as well as compassion in schools. I really am somebody that has experienced both the worst of schools and the best of schools, and I know how not having education, you know, I ended up on housing and welfare and food stamps and, you know, living off $400 a month because of having no education at all. And I know how transformative it can be to have a solid education and a solid support system, and that is what I want to do. I am running for this position not as kind of a political uplift. I've been working towards this job for a long, long time, not thinking I'd ever campaign for it. When our superintendent decided to retire, she said she looked everywhere and thought who would make the most sense to do this job, and her and her crew thought of me, and I said, I will try, I will step up. I've never campaigned, so it's been very interesting, but I want to do this job because it is the job I want to do. You know, I don't want to do it for some political reason. So thank you. I appreciate your endorsement, and thank you for having me today.